Hello and welcome in. Steam Next Fest has come and gone again. Over the course of the past week, I tried out 40 demos. Here are the 10 that I'm most excited about. Starting at number 10 is Mirthwood. Mirthwood is a medieval life sim game, very much in the Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley style. The game starts with you fleeing a war-torn continent and making for a new land where you get a little plot of land and can do whatever you want. Pretty standard for these games. You can farm, you can craft, you can build up your little home. You can visit people and have social interactions, you can go out and fight. Also fairly standard for the genre, all of the systems are fairly simple and streamlined, with none of them being too deep, but that's never really the point. I don't think anyone ever plays these games expecting a rich combat experience or hardcore resource management sim. The point is to live, participate in a large variety of daily tasks that are hopefully more than you can fit in a day so you never run out of things you want to do, and just kind of chill. So what makes this one stand out? A few things. The art style is really nice and complements the medieval setting, which is also a thing that I think works. The exploration seems fun. In my brief time with the demo, I found a couple neat little areas scattered throughout the world. In place of something like a dungeon in Stardew Valley, they have an open world with little landmarks and things, kind of like Skyrim. Close to your home, you find an old abandoned brewery that it almost seems like you can fix up and take ownership of. I also ran into little bandit camps and random events. I also thought the socialization system seemed cool. It almost seemed a bit like The Sims, where you pick topics of conversation that people either gel with or don't. So you can just naturally get along with some people more than others in a slightly deeper style than something like Stardew's Give a Gift That They Like system. This type of game is pretty tough to completely sell in a demo, since the vastness of things you can do and choices you make are the overall appeal, and of course demos need to be capped. But this one allowed a glimpse at what there was to offer, and I felt it. I saw the scope of what I could do, and I didn't feel particularly rushed or pressured into grinding out progress. I would like to spend more time in this world, which is the goal of the demo. At number 9 is Farewell North. Farewell North is kind of an exploration platforming game where you play as a dog on a journey with your human. The story of the human seems to be about grief and loss. The human seems to be on an expedition to deposit her mother's ashes in a place in nature that was meaningful to both of them. The grief and loss is largely represented by a lack of color in the world, but you, as a trusty sidekick border collie, have the ability to introduce a bit of color and hope into the world. You help your human traverse the landscape and take various actions to make her feel better. From the demo, this doesn't seem to be a particularly hardcore game in terms of gameplay. You run around, you find objects to pick up and carry to other locations that will reveal new paths, or you run to an object and bark at it to make something happen. It's essentially flipping a switch with a different skin on it, but the gameplay isn't really the point. It's really just there to give you stuff to do and see and make you feel like you're participating in this story, and it all works for that. The movement and actions you take feel like you're playing as a dog, which makes it easier to get into your role as a loyal companion for your sad human who you want to make feel better. It's cute, it's pretty, and the story seems to be really well done. This one won't be for everyone as it's very story first, gameplay second, and the whole topic of grief and sadness isn't what everyone wants to focus on in video games, but if you like these kind of games, you know you like them. I like games like this, and from what I saw this demo, this looks to be a good one. I'm excited to see how this one plays out. At number 8, we have Mira and the Legend of the Djinns. Mira and the Legend of the Djinns is a throwback 2D platformer in the style of an SNES or Genesis game. And when I say throwback, I'm not only talking about the art style and genre, I mean it kind of feels and plays like an old game. The movement has a bit of floatiness that I don't think you see in a lot of modern games that was pretty common back in the day. And a lot of modern games will specifically place platforms to align perfectly with max jump and dash distances, giving things a really precise and snappy feel that this game doesn't do. And honestly, it's a little endearing. As I was playing through this demo, I was enjoying myself. The story seemed good enough for this type of game, the world seemed decent, the platforming was challenging but relatively simple. In addition to the basics, you have a pickaxe that allows you to chip through walls and climb on certain surfaces. You also have an instrument that you play Ocarina of Time style, where playing a specific song seems to unlock certain things. But an issue I had for most of the demo was the combat. It felt a bit too simple. You just spam sword swipes and your only response to enemy attacks is to roll away or jump. However, eventually this was solved by running into a statue that allows you to buy new combat moves. All of a sudden you gain the ability to uppercut enemies and to juggle attacks, slam down from on top of them, add sword attacks to dashes, and things like that. And from then on, combat goes from being a really basic, boring grind to actually feeling really fun. and ultimately that's why the game ended up on this list. The demo ends with a boss fight that seemed really rhythmic and required me to use some of the combat upgrades I bought very heavily. It wasn't particularly hard once I figured out a routine that allowed me to hit him without being at risk of taking damage, but it was a fun fight. Otherwise, the game seemed to dish out new moves and Metroidvania-style powers pretty regularly. I started off a bit skeptical, but ended up sold on this one. I will definitely play more of this. If you don't particularly care about Metroidvania games or 2D platformers, I'm not sure this is going to be the one to turn you around. But if it's a genre you specifically enjoy, I think there's a lot of fun to be had in this one. Number 7 is Handmancers. Handmancers is kind of weird. It's a roguelike deck builder game a la Slay the Spire or Monster Train, but according to the Steam page, it has a first-person twist, meaning you can see your hands and it looks like you're looking at the monsters from the front instead of an overhead battleground view. And that's, I mean, who cares? It looks nice, but I wouldn't call that a selling hook or anything. But I think the real hook is how much rock, paper, scissors factors into the game. And you play rock, paper, scissors with your hands, so I guess that kind of ties into the whole first-person thing, I guess. You may now be thinking, rock, paper, scissors, is that fun? And I had that initial thought as well, but yes, it is, eventually. So the way this game works is that you have a series of very simple cards in your hand. The cards will either be rock cards, paper cards, or scissors cards. Each turn, your enemy will make one or more attacks that are also based on rock, paper, or scissors. If you play a card that beats your opponent's selection, so for example, if you play a rock card against your opponent's scissors, the damage value on your card will be dealt to the opponent and theirs will not hurt you. Naturally, the opposite happens if you lose, and if you play the same type of card as your opponent, neither deals damage. Then they throw another unique little element into the mix where you don't draw cards every turn. The way you refill your hand to 5 cards is to take a sprint action, which will draw you back up to 5, but always add a hand cramp card, which clogs your hand until you play it against an opponent's card, and is a guaranteed loss. Which sounds absolutely terrible, but not all opponent attack cards deal a ton of damage. There are usually decent opportunities to ditch them, and you can do this action in the middle of a turn. You can even do it multiple times per turn if you need to, which helps mitigate the luck of rock, paper, scissors. So that's pretty basic, but then after every round of combat you gain 3 upgrade points to spend in a little shop. In this shop you can buy little gems that slot into your basic cards and give them special perks, like dealing bleed damage, generating shield points, or refilling HP, things like that. And the important part about these gems is that they apply in battle whether your card wins the rock, paper, scissors matchup or not. So once you start to slot a bunch of those into the cards, the decision process becomes deeper than they played rock, obviously I play my paper card on it. In addition to the gems, you can also buy permanent passive buffs that synergize with your cards or overall build strategy. You do things like increase bleed damage, make special effects happen every time you play a certain type of card, including sometimes cramp cards that were previously useless. Things like that. Things in the shop will typically cost either 1 or 2 of the 3 upgrade points you get, so you can choose between getting big impactful things or spreading stuff around into smaller bonuses. Also worth noting, each of your cards can hold 3 gems, so you have a similar choice there of filling up a few cards to make them super strong, or spreading the love around to make all of them slightly better. Then there's also a normal Slay the Spire type event grid, where not every space is combat. You'll get opportunities to modify your passive buffs or take other stat boosts in spaces. I started out really confused by this one. I thought the first person thing was pointless and the rock, paper, scissors gameplay was going to be awful. But as I learned the systems and saw what they were actually doing with this game, I 180'd on it completely. I think it's really clever. The foundation is incredibly simple, but the choices you get to make to build upon that foundation are very fun. And they give you a lot of choices, allowing you to ramp up very quickly each round. Not to mention, the game just looks really slick and polished. I think this is going to be a pretty good addition to the deck builder genre. It's unfortunately a little tricky to convey the experience succinctly without describing the whole thing like I just did, but if people try it, it reveals itself pretty quickly. Number 6 is Waltz and Jam. I went into Waltz and Jam unsure how much I would like it. I've liked my share of 3D platforming games over the years, but it's usually not my go-to genre. And this game could very much be targeting children, despite seeming to be a story of entering the afterlife. It's very cutesy. The little ghost guy you play as is adorable, and the dog-like friend that follows you around is too. Not to mention your weapons and tools that you use throughout the game aren't toys. But in terms of gameplay and scope, this very much reminded me of 3D platformers like Banjo-Kazooie or, you know, the sequel to Banjo-Kazooie. Listen, it's really not my genre. But if a game of that style is solid, it's solid. And Waltz and Jam is solid. I actually found myself really enjoying the wholesome world they built. The characters have a lot of personality and fit the art style. The justification for places in the world are solid and fleshed out really nicely. The enemies all have good unique characteristics that both make sense in the world and add good gameplay variety. For me, this type of game only works if it's done well. I don't come with any predisposition to get into the individual elements they're going for here, but I had a great time in this demo. It started off a bit slow, with Waltz not really having anything to do other than running around and jumping, but they pretty steadily introduced thing after thing after thing. First of all, jumping on enemies is an attack in the right circumstances. You eventually get the ability to have Jam chomp onto things in the environment so you can climb him like a rope. Then you get a sword, then you get a boxing glove. None of these things are necessarily game changers or anything super unique, though you do utilize the boxing glove in a pretty good variety of ways. The important thing is that the game seems to introduce these things at a really good pace. The game does a pretty good job of pushing you forward from area to area and introducing new ways to interact with the world through enemies, NPCs, and environmental puzzles, so you're constantly doing something new. And the change of scenery and gameplay makes the whole thing feel like a journey, which is the best thing a game like this can do. The best thing I can say about this game is I never got bored, and I was disappointed when the demo ended, because I wanted to see the next part. I suspect it was going to be a boss fight against an owl chef that kidnapped my friend tadpole-like thing who lives in a boot. My biggest issue with the game was Waltz's walking speed in the early parts of the game. It's a cute animation, but it is so slow. Luckily, very early on, you can start to purchase some character upgrades, and walk speed is a thing you can speed up. Anyway, I liked this. It gave me the same thing I got out of playing Banjo-Kazooie back in the day, while still feeling like a very different game, unlike something like Yooka-Laylee, if you remember that game. That game felt like it was trying to be Banjo-Kazooie. This game, in contrast, feels like it's trying to accomplish the same thing as Banjo-Kazooie, while very much being its own game, which worked way better for me. Number 5 is Caravan SandWitch. Caravan SandWitch is another 3D game that very much felt like something I played a while ago. In this case, this one reminded me a ton of Beyond Good and Evil. It shares a lot of the same vibes. The game takes place in kind of a cartoony sci-fi world where not everything is maybe what it seems. You play as a character who is searching for their sister who went missing recently. You return to your hometown and reunite with the cast of characters that you grew up with. The little village seems kind of scrapped together on the outskirts of various ruins and structures that don't seem to be built by the people your character knows. It seems vaguely post-apocalyptic, or the Steam page suggests that maybe the world was largely abandoned by most humans. You rummage through the various ruins for pieces of technology that you can repurpose for tools to help you explore the world and find your sister. You get a van early on in the demo, and towards the end of it, you fit it with a radar dish to help you explore with it. And exploration and mystery seem to be the name of the game here. There is no combat or death in the game, only finding things and completing quests or discovering things that allow you to move forward. The writing seems to be good, the world is very cool, the game feels nice to play. The exploration elements presented in the demo seem substantial enough to carry the game without the threat of death. Searching for things and figuring out where to go and what to do is enough of a task to make completion of it rewarding, though it definitely does feel pretty casual, which I thought was a strength. This is another narrative-driven game that might be a bit too casual for some, but has more gameplay depth than a lot of story-first games, certainly more than like a walking simulator. I thought it was interesting, and I definitely want to see where the story goes, and I also want to drive the little car around and explore ruins. That seemed like a lot of fun. Number 4 is The Operator. The Operator is a detective-style game where you're utilizing a fake computer desktop to accomplish things. I don't know if there's a specific genre for that, but it's definitely something we've seen in other games and is generally something that I really like. These games make you feel like you're investigating things very much in the way you actually would in real life if you were in the role you play in the game. In this one, your job is some kind of FBI analyst who assists field agents with computery tasks that they can't do in the field. Things like analyzing videos, searching for people in databases, or finding clues and connections in the evidence the agents provide. I think that stuff is always fun. Weirdly, the more procedural it feels, the more I feel like a cool investigator, even if it kind of tees up some of the discoveries for you. So this is the type of game that I'd probably like, even if it was just solving one-off little cases for the agents. But the demo very much suggests that you're ultimately going to be unraveling some bigger secrets within the game's FBI-type agency that will require you to make connections between different cases that tie everything together in a bigger overarching thread. It seems very intriguing in kind of a popcorn conspiracy detective thriller sort of way, and I'm very much here for it. Number 3 is The Elder Seed. The Elder Seed is an adventure game, and when I say adventure, I mean with a capital A. In terms of gameplay, it's a fairly straightforward 2D sword combat platformer game, but in its presentation, it has strong vibes of something like the movie The Neverending Story or Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's that style of adventure where a kid is thrust into some big journey that they have to go through to save the world, and along the way they run into dangerous things and a ton of big fantastical places, with notable characters that help them along the way, none of whom really question why the hero of their world is just a little kid. The story is told incredibly well and really sells the epic nature of the journey you're going through. It has a very children's literature type of vibe in it that I thought was fun to experience in a video game. The writing and scope of the journey maybe feels like something on the scale of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, while the art seems like something you'd find in a smaller picture book, like Where the Wild Things Are. These two things combined just gave the whole game this vibe of an adventure story a parent might read to a child. In terms of gameplay, it's a fairly standard platformer. It's not particularly difficult. Creatures you fight and obstacles you face are big enough and dangerous enough to sell the stakes of the adventure you're on, but aren't anything that's really going to challenge someone in the same way like something like a Hollow Knight might. The enemies can mess you up, but the game provides health hearts pretty readily, and pretty early on in the game you get access to a shield that you can use to block enemy attacks that works very well. You're basically invincible if you hold it in front of you. There's a big spider creature you fight in a cave in the demo that would be a bit tricky without the shield, but you have the shield. That being said, I still died to the spider a couple times while I was experimenting with where to stand and how to hit it. But honestly, I think it all works as a cohesive package. Just in terms of the spider example, in the way the story is told, it sells itself as a big epic thing that the main character overcomes, similar to Frodo overcoming that big spider in Lord of the Rings as part of the epic journey to Mordor. But it keeps the children's lit vibe by not being too horrifying or, because it's a video game, too punishing to beat. While I was playing this demo about 20-25 minutes in, I kind of understood the direction the game was going, as I've described here, but I wasn't sure how much I was actually going to enjoy that. But as I got further and further into the demo, I just found myself being completely hooked by it, and for lack of a better term, entertained. The demo is pretty substantial and takes well over an hour to complete, but at no point did I feel like moving on to the next thing, which can sometimes be a struggle in Next Fest when you have 20 more demos to get through. I was perfectly content to keep going. I wanted to see what other encounters they were going to throw at me. I wanted to see the places I'd go. I wanted to meet more characters. I just wanted to experience a fantastic journey. And this ended up being one of the more enjoyable and notable experiences for me this Next Fest. Number 2 is Dungeons of Hinterberg. Dungeons of Hinterberg is kind of a weird game without being a weird game. In terms of gameplay, it's very much a 3D action RPG like a modern Legend of Zelda game. It has combat like you'd expect, where you use a combination of magic and sword slashing to beat a bunch of enemies. It has environmental puzzle solving where you explore, flip switches, and get past obstacle course-like sections. It's just definitely one of those games. But in terms of the theme, it's like ski vacation. Hinterberg is a tourist attraction in the mountains, but instead of ski slopes or mountain trails, the dungeons are the attraction. And like mountain climbers, thrill seekers and adventurers come from all around to tackle the various dungeons of different experience levels. The character you play as has the goal to complete the circuit and get through every dungeon, one of which another adventurer says has never been finished by anyone. So that's kind of a different theme, and it weaves itself into the gameplay in a couple cool ways. First, you have access to what essentially is a snowboard to get around the mountain. Oftentimes you unlock areas by snowboarding through sequences of slalom flags. While the tourist attraction isn't skiing, they still very much keep the ski village setting and atmosphere alive. Another nice addition is how you spend your time in the village. Each day you hit the mountain to tackle a dungeon. In the evenings you hit the town and interact with other tourists. As you forge your relationship with other tourists, you level your character up and unlock new skills and abilities. It's a neat way to do that and reminded me a little bit of the structure of Persona, where you're doing the normal life stuff in between gameplay segments. And then let's talk about the look. It's different. It has a visual style that I enjoyed very much. The whole thing, from theme to visuals to gameplay, just feels very fresh, despite it all being very reminiscent of Zelda games in terms of what you're actually doing. This is definitely one to look out for. And at number 1 is Blue Prince. I'm super excited to talk about this one. This game is very cool. So I'm a big board game player. I go to Gen Con every year. I have a room in my apartment with about 300 different board games in it. I have a game group that meets once a week, and it's pretty reliably the highlight of my week. And Blue Prince is based on a very board game-like foundation. The premise is that you're moving through a mysterious house trying to gain access to a secret room, but each day the house rearranges itself and rooms are random. Each time you open a door, you pick between 3 potential room options. This is very much like a tile-laying board game. Different rooms offer different bonuses, perks, and sometimes inventory items that are required to unlock bonuses and perks in other rooms. For example, some rooms may grant you keys that are required to utilize doors in other room tiles. Some rooms may grant you extra steps, which are basically the currency needed to travel from room to room. Sometimes some of the room options require gems to purchase, which are found in certain room tiles. Ultimately, you're trying to manage your resources and lay things out in a way that allows you to reach the hidden room. Typically, the rooms with the best items in them will be dead ends, and sometimes you just don't get the tiles you need with the doors in the right place to allow you to continue, forcing you to end the day and start fresh again. So far, all of this is something that could be done in a board game. However, as you lay your tiles down, you then physically travel through those rooms, and within those rooms you search for things, solve puzzles, use inventory items, and a bunch of stuff that feels like a first-person video game. I mean, it is a first-person video game, so of course it feels like that. But where I think this is such a cool concept is that the first-person exploration wouldn't be anything special without the tile-laying puzzle, and while the tile-laying puzzle could almost stand on its own as a board game, the first-person exploration of the space elevates it in a way where it feels like something that could only work as a video game. On top of that, it's just a cool mystery that requires you to learn little new things on each run. The game actually encourages you to take notes, and I can see why. In my time in the demo, I learned that the breaker room allows you to turn lights on in the dark room. With the dark room lights on, you can look at several developed photographs that don't really seem to serve a purpose. However, in a later run, I found a magnifying glass in a laboratory room that could be used to examine documents closer. I wasn't actually able to try this in the time the demo offers, but I'm pretty sure there's a photo in the dark room that has something I can read with the magnifying glass. Now, the task of putting a run together where I get all of those rooms at the same time will be tricky for sure, but I'm fairly certain that once I read whatever is in that photo, I won't need to do it again, so I might just need to dedicate a day to doing that. But that's kind of the thing that this game seems to do. Each run isn't just another attempt at finding the secret room where you'll either succeed or fail. The point of each run is to learn a little bit more information about how everything works. You don't unlock anything new from run to run in terms of game mechanics. You unlock pieces of information, almost like Tunic or Outer Wilds. Anyway, I think this is a really unique and clever game, and I cannot wait to play more of it. It's the coolest new idea I've seen in quite a while. But hey, that's it. That's my top 10 from the Steam Next Fest. Kind of a different list for me. For once, it's not all Metroidvania and Survivor games, which I thought was fun. A lot of good variety out there this time. If anything I talked about in this list sounds like something that you would enjoy, please consider wishlisting it on Steam. Wishlisting something is free and doesn't obligate you to buy it, but it lets the developers know that you're interested in the thing they're making, which is super helpful when they're making it. And if you like what I'm doing, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Also free, also doesn't obligate you to do anything, but it helps me out quite a bit. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what your favorite games of Next Fest were. I played through 40 demos, but that's only a tiny fraction of what was available. I'm sure I missed some good ones. Until next time, have a good one.